All right, tonight's stage is set for a truly epic confrontation, one that digs right into the heart of the German soul. In this corner, we have the ancient pagan god, Wotan, and in the other, the sharp, cynical, medieval demon, Mephistopheles. Their dialogue isn't just a simple fight. It's a deep dive into a nation's shadow self. So, let the play begin.
And the curtain rises with an immediate verbal jab. Mephistopheles just comes right out of the gate swinging. He frames Wotan not as this powerful god, but as a relic, really. A ghost that's been demoted by history and a new religion. And listen, this isn't just an insult, it's him declaring a whole new world order. And it perfectly sets the stage for their rivalry.
So we're going to break down this incredible dialogue like a play in 4 acts. First up, we've got the initial clash in God versus Demon. Then, we'll dig into their surprisingly shared history in the Mercurial Shadow. In Act 3, we'll get into the Mirrors of Ambition, and to finish, we'll see the truly terrifying stakes in a nation's pact.
And so, Act 1 begins, God versus Demon. This is where our 2 heavyweights lay their cards on the table. They're establishing their core arguments in this battle for legacy, for identity, and for who really gets to represent the soul of the very land they both claim.
Okay, check out the brilliant tactic Mephistopheles uses here. He doesn't actually deny that Wotan is important. No, he co-opts it. He's basically framing himself as the modern, evolved version, the shadow that, proves the original light even existed. He's making the case that he is the necessary, cynical successor to Wotan's ancient power.
But Wotan's comeback is so swift and so sharp. He just completely rejects this idea that he's some kind of foundation for Mephistopheles. Instead, he just flips that whole metaphor right back at him. He argues that Mephistopheles isn't anything new or original, but just a warped, corrupted image of the very power and spirit that Wotan himself first created. So one sees an evolution, the other sees a complete perversion.
So here's where we stand after that first exchange. On one side, you have Wotan, ancient, elemental, the god of runes and magic, this primal, foundational force. And on the other, Mephistopheles, intellectual, cynical, the product of a much more complex and kinda jaded medieval world. The conflict is officially set, old magic versus modern cunning.
Okay, moving into Act 2, and this is where the plot really thickens. Wotan goes deeper now, and he's about to reveal this really surprising historical connection that ties them together, whether Mephistopheles wants to admit it or not.
Wotan uses a very, very specific word here, calque. He's essentially calling Mephistopheles a loan word, a direct but demonic translation of his own essence. He's arguing that Mephistopheles isn't some new creation, but just a relabeling of an ancient energy that was already there. I mean, what a deeply intellectual insult.
And Wotan comes with receipts. This timeline lays out his whole case. See, he starts as the original restless spirit of wisdom and travel. Then the Romans show up, they see this energy and they go, hey, that's kind of like our god Mercury. Fast forward a few centuries, and suddenly Mephistopheles appears, embodying that same quick-witted, deal-making, go-between role. Wotan is literally tracing a direct family tree of what he calls the mercurial spirit.
So, here's the crucial point, right? Despite one being a sacred god and the other a profane demon, they're really just 2 expressions of the same archetype. This mercurial shadow is a timeless energy. It's the trickster, the wanderer, the one who brings knowledge. They are just 2 faces, an ancient one and a modern one, of the exact same force.
And now for Act 3. This is where things get really personal and cut right to the heart of human ambition. Mephistopheles pushes back, and hard. He accuses Wotan of being a hypocrite, and in doing so reveals this fascinating parallel and how power is always pursued.
I mean, this is Mephistopheles at his absolute best. Cynical, pragmatic, brutally honest. He's basically saying, sure, call me a reflection all you want, but you get to sit up on your throne and talk about honor, while I'm the one down here in the trenches actually making things happen. He's positioning himself as the necessary, practical agent of ambition.
And then he drops his proof. This table is just a masterstroke in his argument. He draws a direct line between his own relationship with the scholar Faust and Wotan's reliance on his tricky advisor, Loge. In both cases, you have a great figure, Faust wanting knowledge, Wotan wanting power, and they both use a morally flexible shadow advisor to get what they want.
And this right here is the core of his accusation. Grand ambition,
Whether it's for knowledge or for power, it often requires some morally gray actions, right? Mephistopheles argues that guys like Wotan and Faust, they just outsource the dirty work. They do it to keep their own self-image squeaky clean. The shadow advisor becomes the tool that lets the master reach his goals without ever getting his own hands dirty.
Which brings us to our final and frankly chilling act. This is where Wotan takes this whole personal dynamic and scales it up to a terrifying national level. He reveals the profound danger that they both represent when they're unleashed on an entire society.
Wotan brings in this powerful idea from psychology. He argues that he and Mephistopheles aren't just characters in old stories. They are active, sleeping archetypes deep within the German psyche. They represent a primordial force of frenzy and storm that can be awakened, not just in one person, but in a whole population. And here it is, the terrifying question that just elevates this entire debate. A Faustian pact. Trading your soul for power or knowledge, that's a story we know for an individual. But Wotan forces us to ask, what happens when millions of people all make that same bargain at the same time?
And this is the result. An entire society decides to trade its moral compass for the promise of power and glory. It's a nation willingly embracing its darkest shadows, its most destructive inner demons. This is the ultimate cautionary tale that Wotan is laying out, a stark warning about the devastation they can unleash together.
And with that, Wotan concludes not with a clear victory, but with this really haunting synthesis. They aren't just enemies, they're two poles of the same eternal, internal struggle. The desire for noble power and the cynical willingness to do whatever it takes to get it. A conflict that is destined to repeat itself like a ghost that just walks right through history. And the question they leave us with is, can that shadow ever really be overcome? Or is it just a permanent part of who we are?